later today in memory of Pope Francis, and black flags being hung on churches and clerical buildings in Austria. A Requiem Mass will be held for the Pope in Vienna later on today. That coming to us from our correspondent there. In France today, the Eiffel Tower will go dark this evening in memory of Pope Francis. Staying in Paris, the bells of Notre Dame Cathedral rang out 88 times earlier today, wondering for each year of the Pope's life, and there will also be a special memorial mass there. Spain, you mentioned this earlier, Lewis, has declared 3 days of national mourning to honour Pope Francis, and there has also been a special memorial mass announced that will be held at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, which is, of course, a vitally important site in the Christian community.
Rich, thank you for that. Jorge, if we just come to you, of course, this was a Pope of firsts, as I mentioned, and will be mentioned quite a lot now in the days ahead, because one of the first Pope from Latin America, a hugely significant figure in the region. Just talk us through, in practice, how that played out. What was the significance, what he achieved?
Of course, being a Latin American Pope meant that he was keen to the problems of the region and to the political context. For example, we saw him between 2014 and 2015 mediating between the United States and Cuba, trying to make that relationship better, and actually somehow he achieved that until President Donald Trump was elected in the first time. All those changes and mediation that took place that meant that the United States, for example, reopened its embassy in La Habana. All that was reversed when Donald Trump was in his first term. But we can also talk about, for example, the peace dialogues between the Colombian government and the far left guerrilla, Las FARC, in Colombia. The Catholic Church under Pope Francis also took an important role mediating between both parts. Quite popular among those that saw him as someone who was representing the majority of a region where most of the people are poor, but also having some conflicts between conservative sectors. He traveled 10 times to the region, never traveled to Argentina, something that calls the attention to many people over there. Apparently, he didn't want to mess up with the internal political situation from his position as a leader of the Catholic Church. But we are seeing the reactions just started to take place right now. It's very early in the morning right now in Latin America. Argentina, one of the first countries to react, already President Milei reacted to his death, the first country, saying that he deeply sorrows what happened with Pope, with whom he had minor differences today. And we are expecting to hear more from other leaders in Latin America.
All right, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to speak now to Gerard O'Connell, who's America Magazine's Vatican correspondent, author of The Election of Pope Francis, an inside story, the conclave that changed history. Thank you for coming on the programme. Well, that title there, Changed History, kind of tees us up, really. How do you try and put this figure in a kind of historical context?
Well, he was, as your previous speaker said, the first pope from outside of Europe, outside of from the New World, from Latin America. He came with a different mindset. He had never studied in Rome. He spent very little in Rome. He was not Europe-formed mindset, and so he brought a whole new freshness, the freshness that you see in the Latin American churches, to Rome, to the Vatican, and to the Universal Church. And he also brought an approach reaching out to people everywhere. He said before he was elected, in his speech to the cardinals before he was elected, he said, we've got to look out. We've got to reach out. And that's exactly what he did. He spent his life reaching out to people of all kinds, and first and foremost to the poor and to the discarded. I think he's put the church on a path that it will be very difficult for a successor to diverge much from.
Interesting. We'll come back to some of those values that drove him and whether how resilient they will be now that he has gone. I just want to take you back to 2013 when he became Pope. He was in his 70s, and the Pope it was seen as a moment of change then. But of course, what he inherited, not least the child sex abuse scandals at the time and still continue now. How do you feel his handling of that will be remembered?
Well, he was on a learning curve because he hadn't understood the vastness of the problem. He had seen some instances of it. Remember, it was less public, if we will say this, in Latin America at that time. Then he suddenly began to see the dimensions, the global dimensions of the problems, and he blamed a lot of it on clericalism and on the way the priests were being trained and the lack of sensitivity. And in fact, he brought into one of the Vatican commissions one of the victims of abuse by priests in Chile. He became a very close friend of his, Juan Carlos Cruz, a gay man who really suffered greatly in Chile. He also brought several people, one from England, one from Ireland, onto the commission for those who survived the abuse. And I think in these 12 years, he was now really in his 13th year, he changed dramatically the stance of the church towards the abuse question. He made it a possibility to remove from office a bishop who did not act when abuse was denounced. So I think he himself realized there was still much to do. He said this not very long ago, but he had put the Catholic Church on a track to safeguard children in all its institutions. And I think history will be much kinder to him than some of his critics today.
Interesting. We will pick up on some of the other challenges he faced. I just want you, if you can, just to stand by. Just want to bring this piece of news that we are just receiving, and it's just an update from the Vatican. And the Vatican have just communicated this. This evening, Monday, April the 21st, at 8 p.m. local time, Cardinal Kevin Joseph Farrell will preside over the rite of the declaration of death and the placing of the body in the coffin. So I just want to repeat that update we're getting from our colleagues that the Vatican has just communicated this. This evening, Monday, April the 21st at 8 p.m. local time, Cardinal Kevin Joseph Farrell will preside over the rite of the declaration of death and the placing of the body in the coffin. Jared, I've just returned to you. Just first of all, any thoughts on that and actually the process that will now unfold?